A homeless girl and her dog were just searching for food, until her scream stopped the night cold. Under a streetlight, two FBI agents lay tied up in the snow, their faces pale, their lips blue. Dying, no one was around. No sirens, no help. Just a 9-year-old girl and a loyal German shepherd staring at death itself. Panic hit her, but she didn't run. What she did next would not only save their lives, but stop something far darker from unfolding in her small town. Stay till the end, and because what this little girl uncovered will leave you speechless. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The snow had been falling for hours, soft but relentless, blanketing the small town in silence. Beneath a dim streetlight, a little girl trudged through the icy streets, her tiny boots barely holding together. Her coat was too big, patched at the elbows, and her breath came out in shaky clouds. She clutched a worn backpack to her chest. Everything she owned fit inside it. Beside her walked a German shepherd, his fur dusted white, his eyes alert, protective. He moved close to her side, his body shielding her from the wind. They were a strange pair, a homeless girl no older than 9 and a dog with the discipline of a guardian. Locals had seen them before, wandering the alleyways, sharing scraps behind diners, sleeping under broken awnings. No one knew her name. Some called her the ghost girl of winter. Others whispered she was running from something. But to the dog, she was family, the only person who had ever shown him kindness. Tonight, the cold was worse than usual. The girl's lips trembled as she crouched beside a garbage bin, pulling out a half-eaten sandwich wrapped in paper. "We'll share, okay?" she whispered, tearing it in two and handing one half to the dog. He accepted it gently, his tail wagging faintly. Despite their hunger, he kept glancing toward the dark end of the alley, ears twitching at every sound. A gust of wind blew through, carrying a faint metallic scent. The girl shivered, clutching her knees. "It's okay, Shadow," she murmured, pressing her cheek against his neck for warmth. "We'll find shelter soon." But the dog didn't relax. His gaze fixed on something invisible in the darkness, and attention only he could sense. Then a low growl rumbled in his throat. The girl frowned. "What is it?" she asked softly. The dog took a cautious step forward, his hackles rising. Snow crunched under his paws as he stared down the narrow alley ahead, but where a flickering streetlight revealed two shapes slumped against a brick wall. And that's when everything changed. The alley stretched between two long brick buildings, narrow and half buried in snow. A single flickering streetlight buzzed overhead, casting a pale yellow glow that danced across the walls. The wind had died down, leaving behind an eerie stillness, the kind that makes every sound echo twice. The girl hesitated at the mouth of the alley, clutching her backpack tightly. Shadow stood rigid beside her, tail stiff, eyes locked on the faint shapes ahead. "Shadow," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Is someone there?" The dog didn't move. He just growled low in his throat, his breath forming white clouds in the frigid air. The girl took a cautious step forward. Her boots sank into the snow with a soft crunch. The sound seemed too loud, as if the whole world was listening. She could see them more clearly now. Two people slumped against the wall, motionless. Their dark uniforms were half buried in snow. Her heart began to race. She looked around, expecting someone to appear, but the alley was empty. "Hello?" she called softly, no answer. Only the wind replying with a soft whistle through the cracks in the bricks. Shadow moved first, padding closer, his nose twitching. He barked once, sharp, alert, commanding. The girl winced at the sudden noise, glancing around nervously. "Shh, they might wake up," she whispered, though deep down she wasn't sure if they could. When she got closer, she noticed something strange. The figures weren't just resting, they were tied. Thick ropes bound their arms and legs together. Their heads drooped forward, snow covering their shoulders. The girl's breath caught in her throat. "Oh no," she murmured. "Shadow, they're hurt." The German shepherd sniffed the air near them and whimpered. His ears flattened as he turned to her with a sharp, urgent bark, one that made her heart jolt. For the first time, she saw the yellow letters on their jackets. FBI. Her stomach dropped. Whoever these people were, they weren't just victims. Something terrible had happened here, and she and her dog had just stepped right into it. The girl's heart hammered as she crouched beside the two motionless agents. The snow muffled every sound except her uneven breathing. Their hands were bound tightly behind them with thick, rough rope, and frost had gathered around their collars. One of them, a woman, had her head tilted to the side, eyes half open but unfocused. The man beside her wasn't moving at all. "Sir, ma'am?" The girl whispered, her voice trembling. She reached out with shaking fingers, brushing the snow from the woman's shoulder. Her jacket was marked with bold yellow letters, FBI. The sight sent a shiver down her spine. Why were federal agents tied up like criminals in an alley? Shadow whined beside her, sniffing the air near their faces. His nose brushed the woman's cheek and he pulled back with a distressed bark. The girl leaned closer and saw it, a faint bluish tint on their lips. Poison. They weren't just freezing. They'd been drugged or worse. Panic surged through her chest. Oh no, she muttered, glancing toward the street, but there was no one. The town had gone quiet hours ago. Only the distant hum of a power line broke the silence. She pressed her fingers gently against the woman's neck. A pulse, faint but there. The man too, weak, barely there. Relief flickered, but it was short-lived. They didn't have long. Shadow barked again, more urgently this time, turning his head toward the far end of the alley. The girl followed his gaze and froze. In the snow, faint footprints led away, large, heavy boot prints still fresh. Whoever had done this was nearby. Fear clawed at her throat, but she forced herself to think. She had to do something, anything, before it was too late. "We need to help them," she whispered. Shadow wagged his tail once, as if in agreement, and nudged her hand with his nose. She grabbed her backpack, pulling out the small water bottle and scarf she always carried. Wrapping the scarf around the woman's neck, she whispered, "Please don't die." The dog pressed close, ears twitching, watching the darkness beyond the alley. The night felt alive now. Watching. Waiting. Somewhere out there, danger still moved, and the little girl had just stepped into the middle of it. Shadow's body stiffened, his fur bristling as he stared into the darkness beyond the alley. The air had changed, heavy, tainted with a chemical sting that made even the girl's throat itch. He lowered his head, sniffing the snow, then moved in slow, deliberate circles, tracking something invisible. "Shadow," she whispered, her voice breaking the stillness. The German shepherd didn't look back. He was locked onto something. His training, or perhaps instinct, was guiding him now. He sniffed the agents again, lingering near their sleeves, then their mouths. A sharp whine escaped him before he turned and pawed at the snow beside them. The girl knelt beside him and brushed away the snow with trembling fingers. There, beneath a thin layer of ice, was a small plastic vial, cracked open, leaking a faint greenish residue. It smelled sharp, metallic, unnatural. She covered her nose, gagging slightly. "What is that?" she muttered, eyes watering. Shadow barked once, short and urgent, and looked toward the footprints leading out of the alley. His gaze said everything. Whoever did this left something behind. The girl's mind raced. She didn't know much about chemicals, but she'd seen enough in the streets to know danger when she smelled it. If this poison was what made the agents collapse, there could be more of it nearby. "Come on, boy," she whispered, standing up. "We have to check." Shadow moved ahead, his paws silent in the snow. He followed the scent trail toward a garbage bin at the corner of the alley. He circled it, sniffing, then barked sharply and backed away. The girl peeked inside, nothing but trash bags and an empty box marked hazardous material, Biosafe Corp. Her stomach tightened. "Biosafe?" she repeated, reading the faded label. That name meant nothing to her, but it meant something to Shadow. He barked again, low and uneasy, before glancing back at the tied agents. Snow began to fall harder, blanketing the scene in white. The girl hugged herself, teeth chattering. She knew one thing now: this wasn't a simple attack. Something much bigger was happening, and somehow, her dog could sense it long before anyone else. The girl's hands shook as she pulled the old cell phone from her backpack, one she'd found weeks ago in a trash bin. It barely worked, its screen cracked, but maybe, just maybe, it could connect. Her thumb trembled as she pressed the power button. The screen flickered, then glowed faintly. "No signal, come on," she whispered, glancing at the motionless agents. Their lips were still blue, their breathing shallow. "Please work." Shadow whimpered beside her, nudging her arm as if to hurry her. She tried again, moving toward the street, waving the phone high above her head. A weak bar appeared, then vanished. Finally, one call connected. "Hello?" she cried. "Please, 2 people are hurt. They're FBI. They're not moving." The voice on the other end crackled. "Who is this?" "My name's Lily." she shouted. I found them near 7th Street behind the diner. But before she could say more, the line cut off. Dead silence. No, no, no. She hit redial again, tears freezing on her cheeks. Nothing. The battery icon blinked red. 1%. Shadow barked, his ears pricking toward the distant sound of footsteps. Lily spun around, but no one was there. Just wind rushing through the alley, carrying a metallic scent that made her stomach twist. She took a deep breath and looked at the phone one last time. The battery died in her hand. Darkness swallowed the screen. For a moment, panic threatened to take over. She was 9 years old, freezing alone, and 2 people's lives were slipping away before her eyes. But when she looked at Shadow, standing tall beside the fallen agents, something inside her steadied. If no one's coming, she whispered, voice trembling but firm, then we'll save them ourselves. Shadow wagged his tail once, his breath steaming in the cold air. The girl tightened her scarf and turned back toward the alley. The faint snow glittered under the dim streetlight, and somewhere in that stillness, hope flickered. Tonight it was up to them. Lily ran through the snow-covered streets, her breath coming out in quick, shallow bursts. The cold bit into her cheeks, but she didn't stop. Every window she passed was dark. The shops were closed, the town asleep. She banged on a gas station door, shouting for help, but no one answered. Her small fists left prints of desperation on the glass before she gave up and stumbled back into the street. Shadow followed close, his paws barely making a sound. The German shepherd kept glancing over his shoulder, uneasy, as if something unseen was following them. When they finally reached the alley again, Lily's heart dropped. The snow had thickened, nearly covering the agents. Their breathing was weaker now, their faces pale under the harsh streetlight. Oh no, she gasped, dropping to her knees beside them. Hold on, please hold on. She brushed the snow from their faces and looked at Shadow. We need to move them somewhere warm. But they were heavy, far too heavy for her to lift. She tried pulling the woman's arm, grunting with effort, but her small hand slipped. The ropes were still tight. Shadow, she whispered desperately. Help me. The dog immediately bit down on one of the ropes, tugging and gnawing with fierce determination. The strands began to fray. Lily used the dull pocket knife she kept in her backpack to saw through the rest. It took all her strength, but finally, the rope snapped. The woman's body slumped forward, a weak breath escaping her lips. Lily's heart skipped. You're alive, she whispered, tears of relief mixing with melting snow. Shadow barked twice, low and alert. He turned his head toward the alley's entrance, ears raised. Lily froze. Someone was out there, faint footsteps crunching in the snow, growing louder. Hide, she whispered. She dragged her backpack and crouched behind a stack of crates. Shadow stood protectively in front of her, muscles tense, growl rumbling deep in his chest. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Only the soft hiss of falling snow. Lily's pulse pounded in her ears. Whoever had done this might have come back, and now she and her dog were the only witnesses. But she wasn't running anymore. Not tonight. For a few tense seconds, nothing moved. The alley was quiet except for the soft hiss of falling snow. Then Shadow's nose twitched. His head turned sharply toward the corner near the garbage bin. A low growl built in his throat, not out of fear, but warning. Lily followed his gaze. What is it? She whispered. Shadow moved slowly, sniffing the ground, his paw scraping against the snow. He stopped suddenly, ears pricked. Then with one strong swipe, he began digging. Snow and dirt scattered as he unearthed something small and black. Lily leaned closer, her breath fogging in the air. It looked like a metal box, about the size of a lunch container, half buried beneath the frost. A faint red light blinked on its side, steady and rhythmic. Her stomach dropped. Shadow. Don't touch it. The dog froze but kept growling. The red light blinked faster now, as if reacting to movement. Lily's hands trembled. She'd seen enough movies to know what blinking red lights meant. It's a bomb, she whispered. But then she noticed something strange. Wires running from the device into a small tube that disappeared into the snow near the agents. Poison. It wasn't an explosive. It was dispersing something. A gas, maybe. Slow, invisible, deadly. Lily covered her mouth in horror. The agents weren't just attacked. They were meant to die here quietly, their bodies found frozen by morning. Shadow barked once, snapping her out of the trance. She grabbed a piece of cloth from her bag and gently covered the box, trying not to touch the blinking light. Her pulse raced. "We can't stay here," she whispered. "We have to tell someone." The dog barked again, but softer this time, and turned toward the main street as if urging her to follow. Lily looked back at the agents one last time, her heart breaking. They didn't have much time left. But neither did the town. Snowflakes clung to the girl's eyelashes as she crouched once more beside the fallen agents. The blinking red light under the cloth flickered in the corner of her eye like a heartbeat. Every second felt louder than the last. She gently brushed snow off the man's chest. His badge glimmered faintly under the streetlight, FBI Special Agent Collins. The letters blurred through her tears. "Please wake up," she whispered. She shook his shoulder gently, but his head only slumped to the side. Then to her shock, his fingers twitched. His lips moved, barely forming words. Lily leaned in close, her ear almost against his mouth. His voice was just a breath. Water? What?" she asked softly. "Water? You're thirsty?" His eyes fluttered open for half a second, unfocused but burning with desperate intent. "A plant. Water. Supply." The words faded, his body going still again. Lily's pulse raced. She looked toward the black box still half buried in snow, the small tube that led away from it. Water supply. The connection struck her like lightning. The tube didn't just lead into the ground by chance. It ran directly toward the drainage grate at the end of the alley. She scrambled forward, brushing snow away from the metal grate. Beneath it, dark water gurgled faintly, the runoff system that fed into the town's purification line. Her breath caught. "Oh no," she whispered. "They're poisoning the town." Shadow barked sharply, pacing in tight circles. He sniffed near the grate, then looked back at her with a deep, urgent growl. He knew too. Lily's mind spun. Someone had tied these agents up to stop them from stopping this. The device wasn't meant to kill them. It was meant to keep them from warning anyone. The poison was meant for everyone else. She looked down at the man again. His lips were pale, but she could still feel a weak pulse. "You tried to stop them," she murmured, clutching his gloved hand. "Don't worry. I'll finish what you started." Shadow barked again, louder this time, echoing into the cold, empty street. The little girl straightened, her breath forming clouds in the dark. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a rescue anymore. It was a race against time. The moment the truth hit her, Lily didn't hesitate. She slung her backpack over her shoulder and looked at Shadow. "We have to find where that pipe leads," she said, her voice trembling but firm. Snow whipped around them, the wind howling through the alley as if warning her to turn back. But she couldn't, not now. Not when the whole town might be in danger. Shadow took the lead, nose to the ground, tracking the faint chemical scent that lingered in the air. His paws left deep prints in the snow as they sprinted down narrow streets and across empty intersections. The town was asleep, unaware that poison crept beneath their feet. Lily's breath came out in sharp gasps as she followed the German Shepherd. Streetlights flickered overhead, and in the distance the old water tower loomed like a ghost against the dark sky. "That's where it goes, Shadow," she panted. "It has to." They passed the diner where she sometimes found scraps, its neon sign flickering weakly. The roads grew steeper, snow crunching underfoot. Shadow paused suddenly, barking toward an abandoned service road. Lily squinted through the storm and saw tire tracks, fresh ones, leading uphill. Someone had been there recently. Maybe the people who tied the agents, maybe the ones who planted the poison. Her heart hammered in her chest. "Let's go," she whispered. The road led to a fenced area near the base of the water tower. The gate was open just enough for Shadow to slip through. Lily crawled after him, her hands freezing against the metal. They crept closer, crouched behind an old maintenance truck. Through the swirling snow, she spotted them. Two shadowy figures near a large metal pipe connected to the main water line. One held a flashlight, the other a black briefcase. Their voices were low, urgent. Lily ducked lower, pressing herself against the truck. Shadow's ears twitched, his growl barely audible. She whispered, "Well, we can't let them finish." Her mind raced. She was just a child, but she was the only one who knew. The only one who could stop them. And as the dog tensed beside her, ready to move, she realized something terrifying. They weren't adding poison. They were already done. The flow had begun. The two figures disappeared into the storm, their footprints vanishing almost instantly beneath fresh snow. Lily waited until the sound of their boots faded before crawling out from behind the truck. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The water tower stood tall and silent above her, the hum of its pumping system echoing faintly through the pipes. Whatever had been released into that line was already moving through the system, spreading with every second that passed. Shadow nudged her arm, his breath visible in the freezing air. "We have to find where they came from," Lily whispered, glancing at the trail leading away from the tower. It wound through the trees toward the outskirts of town, ending at an old warehouse with shattered windows and rusted doors. The building loomed like a monster in the dark, abandoned but not empty. As they approached, a faint light flickered inside. Shadows moved across the cracked walls. Lily crouched low, clutching her backpack tightly. "Stay close," she whispered. Shadow crept beside her, silent as smoke. Inside, the air smelled of oil, chemicals, and metal. Broken machinery littered the floor, and the wind whistled through holes in the roof. But at the far end of the warehouse, several large containers sat on pallets, each marked with the same logo she'd seen on the box in the alley, BioSafe Corp. Her stomach clenched. "This is where it started," she murmured. Suddenly a sharp clang echoed through the space. Lily froze. A door slammed somewhere behind the crates. Voices, 2, maybe 3, were arguing in hushed tones. "She saw us," one man hissed. "That dog, he smelled the compound. She's just a kid," another snapped. "We'll finish cleaning up and leave before anyone finds them." Lily's blood ran cold. They knew. She ducked behind a rusted barrel, holding her breath. Shadow crouched beside her, his ears flat, muscles tight. He growled so quietly it was almost a vibration. The men's footsteps grew closer, boots crunching on broken glass. Lily pressed a hand over Shadow's fur, whispering, "Not yet. Please, not yet." But the warehouse wasn't big enough to hide forever. One wrong move and they'd be found. And in that dark, frozen place, she knew discovery could mean death. The warehouse felt alive. Every creak, every echo of boots bouncing off metal walls sent shivers racing down Lily's spine. She crouched behind the barrel, barely daring to breathe. The men's flashlights cut through the darkness in long, sweeping beams, each one sliding dangerously close to where she hid. "Check the back," one of them barked. "If the cops find this place before we move the rest, it's over." Lily's heart hammered. The rest, there was more poison. More containers. This wasn't a single act, and it was a coordinated attack. Shadow pressed against her leg, waiting for her signal. She met his eyes and nodded once. The German Shepherd slipped silently into the shadows, circling the crates. He moved like smoke, unseen but everywhere. When the men turned away, Lily crawled forward, her fingers brushing against a small control panel on one of the containers. A digital timer blinked red. It wasn't just storage. It was a release mechanism. And it was active. "No," she whispered, her breath shaking. "They're planning another wave." Before she could think, one of the men turned. "Hey, what was that?" The flashlight beam landed right on her. Lily froze, caught. The man's eyes widened in disbelief. "You again? How?" Before he could finish, Shadow lunged from the darkness, his bark exploding through the warehouse like thunder. He collided with the man, knocking him off balance. The other turned, shouting, "Get the dog!" Lily scrambled to her feet, grabbing the metal rod that leaned against a crate. Without thinking, she slammed it against the control panel, shattering the screen. Sparks flew. The timer froze at 0:42. The lights flickered violently, alarms blaring from somewhere deeper in the building. Shadow growled, backing toward her. The men recovered fast, fury twisting their faces. "Run!" Lily shouted, her voice breaking. She darted between the crates, Shadow on her heels. Bullets cracked through the air, splintering wood and metal. She ducked, stumbled, but kept moving until a bright emergency exit sign glowed ahead like salvation. They burst through the door into the freezing night. Behind them, the warehouse roared with alarms. They had stopped one disaster, but she knew it wasn't over. The real danger was still flowing through the town's veins. Snow whipped across the road as Lily and Shadow sprinted through the darkness, their lungs burning from the cold. The sound of alarms still echoed faintly behind them, fading into the storm. Her legs ached, her hands numb, but she didn't stop. The words the agent had whispered, "water supply," echoed in her mind like a warning she couldn't escape. They reached the edge of town where a frozen creek cut through the landscape, feeding into the waterline below. Steam rose faintly from a maintenance hatch at the base of the hill, the same pipe connected to the poisoned tank. Lily's heart pounded. "That's it, Shadow," she gasped. "If we close it, maybe we can stop it." The hatch was secured with a heavy lock. She dropped to her knees, rummaging through her backpack until she found the dull pocket knife she'd used earlier. Her fingers shook as she jammed it into the padlock's hinge. It wouldn't budge. Tears welled in her eyes from frustration. "Please," she whispered. "Please work," Shadow barked and bit down on the edge of the lock, tugging hard. The metal creaked, resisting, then finally snapped with a crack that echoed into the night. Lily threw the hatch open. Inside, the pipe hummed with pressure. A control valve blinked red, pumping faster and faster. The poison was spreading. She crawled halfway into the tunnel, the cold metal biting her palms. "I have to turn it off," she whispered. Her fingers wrapped around the wheel, but it wouldn't move. She pushed harder, her small frame trembling with effort. "Come on," Shadow barked behind her, his paws scraping the ice, urging her on. With a cry, she twisted the valve one last time, and it stopped. The red light dimmed, replaced by a faint green glow. Silence. The rush of water slowed, then faded completely. Lily slumped back, panting, her body shaking from exhaustion. Shadow pressed against her, licking her frozen hand. She smiled weakly. "We did it," she whispered, tears glistening in the moonlight. Somewhere in the distance, sirens began to wail, growing louder by the second. For the first time that night, she let herself believe it. They might actually make it out alive. Blue and red lights pierced through the blizzard as the distant sirens grew closer. Lily stumbled to her feet, clutching Shadow's fur for balance. The cold bit deep, but the sound of approaching vehicles filled her with hope. She turned toward the main road just as two black SUVs slid to a stop on the icy pavement. Doors flew open and armed officers spilled out, flashlights cutting through the storm. "Hands where I can see them," one shouted, scanning the shadows. Lily raised her trembling hands. "Please, please help them," she cried, voice cracking. "The FBI agents, they're in the alley." "They're poisoned." The officers froze. One of them, an older man with a commanding tone, stepped forward. "What did you say?" "They're still alive. But you have to hurry." Shadow barked once, as if confirming her words. That bark seemed to snap everyone into motion. The commanding officer spoke into his radio, his voice sharp. "Dispatch, we've got a code red. 2 agents down, possible toxin exposure. Send hazmat and medical immediately." Within moments, a flurry of movement erupted. EMTs rushed past Lily carrying stretchers and oxygen tanks. Others in full protective gear sprinted toward the alley. The chaos of flashing lights and shouting voices surrounded her. But she couldn't stop shaking. A female medic knelt beside her. "Sweetheart, are you hurt?" Lily shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "No, but they were dying. I tried to help." The woman wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and gave her a soft smile. "You did more than help," she said gently. "You saved lives." Shadow sat beside Lily, his fur glistening with snow, his eyes fixed on the flashing lights ahead. For the first time all night, he looked calm, his job done. As the paramedics loaded the agents into the ambulances, one of them looked toward Lily and mouthed a silent word of gratitude. And in that moment, under the swirling snow and siren lights, the little girl and her loyal dog stopped being invisible. They had become heroes. By dawn, the storm had passed. The town lay still under a blanket of fresh snow, but the quiet hid the chaos that had nearly unfolded. Inside St. Anne's Hospital, the halls buzzed with controlled urgency. Agents, doctors and local police moving between rooms, their faces grim but relieved. Lily sat on a bench in the hallway, bundled in a thick blanket. Shadow lay at her feet, eyes half closed but alert. Every few minutes, his ears twitched toward the sound of distant voices and doors opening. The warmth of the hospital was strange after the freezing night, almost too calm, too clean. A doctor in a white coat approached, carrying a clipboard. He crouched beside her, his voice gentle. "Lily, right? You're the one who found the agents." She nodded quietly. "Are they okay?" He smiled faintly. "Thanks to you, yes. They're both stable. You got to them just in time." Before she could respond, 2 men in dark suits entered the hallway. Their coats bore the unmistakable emblem, FBI. One of them, Agent Monroe, had a bandaged hand and tired eyes. "Lily," he said softly. "I'm Special Agent Monroe. The people you found were my colleagues, She straightened nervously. I wanted to help. Monroe exchanged a look with the doctor before kneeling to her level. You did more than help. What you and your dog uncovered tonight stopped something catastrophic. He held up a file. Inside were photos of the black device, the containers and lab labels stamped with BioSafe Corp. They were planning to contaminate the water supply, Monroe explained. Not just here, the toxin was meant to spread through the entire county within hours. Lily's eyes widened. So, the agents were trying to stop them. He nodded. And you finished what they started. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they weren't from fear. Monroe smiled softly and extended his hand. You saved thousands of lives, Lily. You and that brave dog of yours. Shadow lifted his head proudly, tail thumping once against the tile. For the first time, Lily didn't feel invisible or unwanted. She looked up at the agents, at the doctor, at the warmth of the room, and realized that somehow she and Shadow had changed everything. Morning sunlight poured through the hospital windows, melting the last traces of frost on the glass. The storm was gone, but its memory lingered. In the empty streets, the flashing caution tape and the soft hum of news vans outside. The world now knew about the little homeless girl and her dog who saved an entire town. Lily sat on a hospital bed, freshly dressed in clean clothes for the first time in months. The oversized sweater hung loosely on her small frame, but it was warm. Shadow sat beside her, tail thumping lightly against the sheets, eyes watching every nurse who passed by. He didn't trust anyone completely, except her. A gentle knock on the door made her look up. Agent Monroe stepped in, holding 2 paper cups of hot chocolate. Figured heroes deserve something sweeter than coffee, he said with a smile. Lily's cheeks flushed pink as she accepted it. Are the agents okay? She asked, her voice small but steady. They're awake, Monroe said, and they've been asking about you. He sat down beside her, setting his cup aside. Lily, the Bureau and the Town Council talked this morning. We want to make sure you're never out on the streets again. Her eyes widened. You mean a home? Monroe nodded. A real one. Somewhere safe, and yes, Shadow's coming too. At the sound of his name, the German Shepherd barked once, tail wagging. The room filled with laughter. Soft, genuine, the kind Lily hadn't heard in years. Monroe leaned forward, his tone gentle. You're a brave kid, Lily. Most adults would have run. But you stayed. You fought. You saved us all. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they were tears of relief. I just didn't want anyone else to be alone, she whispered. Monroe smiled. You're not alone anymore. He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a note from one of the rescued agents. To the girl who listened when no one else did, you're the reason we're alive. Thank you. Lily pressed the letter to her chest, glancing down at Shadow. We did it, she murmured. Outside, sunlight broke through the clouds, painting the snow in gold. For the first time, Lily didn't have to keep walking. She finally had a place to belong, and a hero's story to call her own.